Ever wondered what echoes in the final moments of those who walked a solitary path through life? Imagine a queen who ruled an empire for 44 years, alone on the throne, offering all her riches for just one more breath. Picture one of literature's most beloved romance writers, whose own story ended not with a wedding, but with a stark desire for death's embrace. Think of the artist whose canvases explode with vibrant life, yet whose last whisper was of a sadness that would never end. These aren't just fleeting quotes. They are windows into hearts that experience the world with a unique intensity, often marked by profound independence, sometimes by deep loneliness, and always by a singular journey. We delve into the recorded last words of 11 remarkable individuals from history, all of whom remained lifelong singles. Their final utterances, stripped of pretense, offer a glimpse into the human condition, raw and unfiltered. Prepare to explore facts, dates, and insights surrounding these powerful farewells, leaving you to ponder their weight without us drawing any conclusions. Number 11. The universal genius who feared his work wasn't enough. Leonardo da Vinci, born on April 15, 1452, in the rustic countryside of Tuscany near the town of Vinci, was a man whose talents knew almost no bounds. He was a painter, sculptor, architect, musician, scientist, inventor, anatomist, geologist, cartographer, botanist, writer, and historian. His mind soared across disciplines, leaving behind masterpieces like the Mona Lisa and The Last Supper, and notebooks filled with futuristic inventions and meticulous anatomical drawings. Leonardo never married and had no known children. His life was dedicated to his art and his insatiable curiosity. He moved between powerful patrons, from Lorenzo de' Medici in Florence to Ludovico Sforza in Milan, and finally to King Francis I of France. In his final years, Leonardo lived in Amboise, France, at the Château du Clos-Luce, a gift from King Francis I. He was already a celebrated figure, revered for his intellect and artistic prowess. However, despite his monumental achievements, a sense of unfulfillment seemed to shadow him. As his health declined, perhaps due to a series of strokes, he made meticulous arrangements for his will and his burial. Passed away on May 2, 1519, at the age of 67. According to Giorgio Vasari, the 16th century biographer of artists, Leonardo da Vinci's last words were, "I have offended God and mankind because my work did not reach the quality it should have." These words, if accurately reported, resonate with a profound sense of humility, or perhaps a deep-seated perfectionism that even a lifetime of extraordinary creation could not satisfy. For a man who never formed a traditional family unit, whose primary legacy was his vast body of work and inquiry, this final reflection on its perceived inadequacy offers a stark insight. It speaks to the immense standards he set for himself, a lifelong pursuit of understanding and creation that, in his own eyes, at the very end, fell short. The man who gave the world so much felt in his last moments that he had not given enough, or not of a high enough quality. This sentiment from one of history's most accomplished individuals, who navigated his path without a spouse or direct descendants, points to a deep internal measure of worth tied intrinsically to his contributions to the world. Number 10. The storyteller who longed for light in his final darkness. Hans Christian Andersen, born April 2, 1805, in Odense, Denmark, was a master of the fairy tale. Stories like The Little Mermaid, The Ugly Duckling, The Snow Queen, and The Emperor's New Clothes have captivated generations of children and adults worldwide. His tales often explored themes of longing, difference, unrequited love, and the search for belonging, perhaps reflecting aspects of his own life. Andersen never married and experienced several unrequited loves for both men and women throughout his life, which are documented in his diaries and letters. He craved affection and intimate companionship, but often found himself on the periphery of the domestic happiness he so vividly described for some of his characters. Despite achieving international fame and the friendship of notable figures like Charles Dickens, Andersen was known to struggle with feelings of loneliness and insecurity. He was a sensitive soul, deeply affected by criticism, and keenly aware of his own perceived shortcomings. In the early 1870s, signs of liver cancer began to appear. His health gradually deteriorated, confining him more and more to his home in Copenhagen. As he weakened, friends and admirers would visit, reading to him and offering comfort. He died on August 4th, 1875, at the age of 70, at a house called Rollid, near Copenhagen. Sources vary slightly on his exact last words. One commonly reported utterance as he lay dying in response to a question about his comfort, or perhaps a general inquiry, was, "Don't ask me how I am. I understand nothing." This phrase conveys a sense of final confusion, perhaps a surrender to the incomprehensible nature of his suffering or the transition he was facing. Another account suggests his final words were simpler, a plea, "Don't let them draw the curtains." This desire to keep the light, to resist the encroaching darkness, is powerfully evocative. For a man whose imagination populated the world with vibrant characters and magical landscapes, yet who personally grappled with periods of profound melancholy and a sense of being an outsider, this wish to hold on to the light, or his admission of not understanding, offers a poignant glimpse into his state of mind at the very end of his solitary journey. Number 9. The expatriate novelist who met death as a distinguished thing. Henry James, born in New York City on April 15, 1843, was a towering figure in transatlantic literary culture. His novels, such as The Portrait of a Lady, The Turn of the Screw, and The Ambassadors, are celebrated for their psychological acuity, intricate prose, and exploration of the consciousness of his characters, often Americans encountering European society. James spent most of his adult life in England, becoming a British subject in 1915, a year before his death, in part as a gesture of allegiance to the United Kingdom during World War I and disillusionment with the United States' initial reluctance to enter the conflict. He never married, and his personal life remains a subject of much scholarly discussion, with his relationships often characterized by intense emotional connections that did not lead to conventional partnership. His correspondence reveals deep affections for both men and women, but he maintained a determinedly single existence, dedicating himself to his literary craft. In December 1915, James suffered a stroke. His health declined over the following months. He was tended to by his devoted secretary, Theodora Bosanqui, and his niece, Peggy. As he lay dying, his mind, ever active and analytical, seemed to observe his own passing with a kind of detached curiosity. He reportedly dictated fragments of letters, some addressed to Napoleon Bonaparte, reflecting his mind's drift into historical reverie. Henry James passed away in London on February 28, 1916, at the age of 72. His last intelligible words, recorded by his niece, were, "So it has come at last, the distinguished thing." This phrase is quintessentially Jamesian, elegant, slightly ironic, and profoundly thoughtful. Death for him was not merely an end, but an event of some note, something distinguished. For a man who lived a life largely of the mind, observing and dissecting human experience with unparalleled subtlety, this final assessment seems fitting. It suggests an intellectual appraisal of his own mortality, a final observation from a lifelong observer. There is a certain solitary dignity in these words, a recognition of a significant inevitable arrival, met not with overt fear or effusive sentiment, but with a kind of formal, almost literary acknowledgement. The poignancy lies in this characteristic detachment, the final act of a man who navigated life's complexities with intellectual rigor, largely on his own terms. Number 8. The thinker who prayed for divine presence at the end. Blaise Pascal, born on June 19, 1623, in Clermont-Ferrand, France, was a child prodigy who grew into one of the most brilliant minds of the 17th century. He was a mathematician, physicist, inventor, philosopher, and theologian. His contributions to mathematics include significant work on probability theory and projective geometry. In physics, he clarified the concepts of pressure and vacuum. He even invented an early mechanical calculator, the Pascaline. Despite his scientific achievements, Pascal is perhaps most widely known for his philosophical and religious writings, particularly the Pensies, a collection of fragments intended as an apology for Christian belief. Pascal never married and lived a life increasingly dedicated to asceticism and religious devotion, especially after a profound religious experience in 1654. He suffered from poor health for much of his life, enduring chronic pain and illness. His focus shifted from worldly pursuits towards contemplation of God and the human condition. He became associated with the Jansenist movement, a form of Augustinianism within Catholicism. His later years were marked by both intense intellectual labor on his religious works and increasing physical frailty. He died in Paris on August 19, 1662, at the young age of 39, after a prolonged and painful illness, likely carcinomatous meningitis following a malignant stomach tumor. As his end approached, Pascal was surrounded by his sister, Gilberte Perrier, and her family. His final words, uttered with clarity despite his suffering, are recorded as, "May God never abandon me." These words are a direct and desperate plea, reflecting the core of his later life's preoccupations, his relationship with the divine. For a man who had renounced many worldly comforts and connections to focus on his faith, this final prayer bears a deep human fear of abandonment, even in the context of a strong spiritual conviction. It's a cry for ultimate companionship and security in the face of the unknown. Poignancy of these words from a lifelong single individual lies in their universal resonance, the desire not to be left alone at the ultimate threshold, appealing to the highest power he recognized for constant presence. Number 7. The young poet who greeted death with thanks and concern for his friend. John Keats, born in London on October 31, 1795, was one of the principal figures of the second generation of Romantic poets, alongside Lord Byron and Percy Bysshe Shelley. Despite his short life and relatively small poetic output, his work, characterized by vivid imagery, sensual appeal, and exploration of beauty and transience, has had an enduring influence. Poems like Ode to a Nightingale, Ode on a Grecian Urn, and To Autumn are considered masterpieces of English literature. Keats's life was marked by early loss. His father died when he was 8, his mother when he was 14. He trained as an apothecary, but ultimately abandoned medicine for poetry. Keats fell deeply in love with Fanny Brawne, and they became engaged. However, their marriage was prevented by his declining health and precarious financial situation. He contracted tuberculosis, the disease that had killed his brother Tom. Seeking a warmer climate to improve his health, Keats traveled to Rome in late 1820 with his devoted friend, the painter Joseph Severn. His health, however, continued to deteriorate rapidly. He died in Rome on February 23, 1821, at the tragically young age of 25, nursed tirelessly by Severn. In his final hours, Keats, aware that his end was near, spoke to Severn. His last words were reported by Severn as, "Severn, I lift me up. I am dying, I shall die easy. Don't be frightened, be firm, and thank God it has come. These words reveal a mixture of acceptance of his own fate and a tender concern for his friend. The request, "Lift me up," speaks to his physical weakness, while "I shall die easy" and "Thank God it has come" suggest a weariness with suffering and a readiness for its end. His admonition to Severn, "Don't be frightened, be firm," shows remarkable altruism in his final moments. For Keats, whose life was so brief and whose passionate love for Fanny Brawne remained unfulfilled in marriage, these words are deeply poignant. They reflect not only the end of his physical pain, but also the cessation of a life brimming with poetic genius and youthful dreams that were cut short before they could fully blossom, including the dream of a shared life with the woman he loved. Number 6. The gentle author whose final night was one of weariness and pain. Washington Irving, born in New York City on April 3, 1783, holds a distinguished place as one of America's first internationally acclaimed authors. He is beloved for his short stories, particularly The Legend of Sleepy Hollow and Rip Van Winkle, which have become iconic pieces of American folklore. Irving also wrote historical works, biographies, and essays. Charming readers with his graceful prose and gentle humor, he served as the United States ambassador to Spain from 1842 to 1846. A pivotal event in Irving's personal life was the death of his fiancée, Matilda Hoffman, in 1809. She was only 17, and her passing from consumption devastated Irving. He never married, and by all accounts, remained devoted to her memory throughout his life. He kept her Bible and a miniature portrait of her with him always. While he formed many warm friendships and was a cherished guest in literary and social circles on both sides of the Atlantic, the prospect of marriage seemed to have ended for him with Matilda's death. He dedicated himself to his writing and his diplomatic career, achieving great success, but always carrying a certain air of melancholy. In his later years, Irving lived at his picturesque home, Sunnyside, in Tarrytown, New York. He suffered from asthma and a heart condition. On the evening of November 28, 1859, at the age of 76, as he was preparing for bed, he spoke to his niece. His last recorded words were, "Well, I must arrange my pillows for another weary night. If this could only be beaten out of me." Shortly after uttering these words, he collapsed and died from a heart attack. These final remarks convey a deep sense of exhaustion and an ongoing struggle with physical suffering. The weariness is palpable, the desire for relief from his ailments profound. For a man who had lived more than half a century since the loss of his youthful love, these words paint a picture of a long-endured burden. The poignant image of him arranging his pillows for yet another weary night, unaware it would be his last, casts a life of quiet endurance and perhaps a lingering sadness that even his literary triumphs and widespread affection could not entirely dispel. Number 5. The musical titan who yearned to hear in a realm beyond. Ludwig van Beethoven, baptized on December 17, 1770 in Bonn, Germany, is one of the most revered and influential composers in the history of Western music. His works spanning the transition from the classical period to the Romantic era include symphonies, concertos, sonatas, and string quartets that are staples of the classical repertoire. Beethoven's genius was matched by his tempestuous personality and his tragic struggle with progressive deafness, which began in his late 20s and eventually left him almost totally deaf. Despite this profound challenge, he continued to compose some of his most powerful and innovative music. Beethoven never married, though he longed for intimate companionship. His famous Immortal Beloved Letter, found after his death, reveals the depth of his passionate but ultimately unattainable love for an unnamed woman. His deafness increasingly isolated him, contributing to his reputation for being irascible and withdrawn. The Heiligenstadt Testament, a letter written to his brothers in 1802, documents his despair over his hearing loss and his contemplation of suicide, from which only his art held him back. Poured his frustrations, his joys, and his heroic spirit into his music. Beethoven died in Vienna on March 26, 1827, at the age of 56, after a prolonged illness, likely liver disease complicated by pneumonia. The circumstances of his death and his last words are subject to some variation in historical accounts. One often cited phrase reportedly uttered when he was told that a case of wine he had been expecting from his publisher had finally arrived is, "Pity, pity, too late, shade, shade, Zeus spat." While referring to the wine, these words have often been interpreted more broadly as a lament for opportunities lost or help that arrived too late in his life. Another, perhaps more spiritually resonant account of his last coherent words is a hopeful declaration. "I shall hear in heaven." For a composer who had been denied the full experience of his own magnificent creations for so many years due to deafness, this sentiment is profoundly poignant. It speaks to a hope that beyond the confines of his earthly suffering and silence, he would finally be able to perceive sound and music in its purest form. This longing for sensory restoration in an afterlife offers a touching final note to the life of a man whose solitary struggles were as immense as his artistic legacy. Some accounts also mention his very last words being plaudite, amici, commedia finita est, applaud, friends, the comedy is over, a conventional closing for Roman plays, suggesting a more theatrical and resigned farewell. Number 4. The reclusive poet who saw the fog rise as she departed. Emily Dickinson, born on December 10, 1830, in Amherst, Massachusetts, is one of America's most original and enigmatic poets. During her lifetime, only a handful of her nearly 1,800 poems were published, and those were often altered to fit conventional poetic forms. It was only after her death that her sister Lavinia discovered the vast collection of her work, leading to her posthumous recognition as a major literary figure. Her poetry is characterized by its unconventional punctuation, slant rhymes, short lines, and profound explorations of themes such as death, immortality, nature, faith, and the inner life. Dickinson lived an increasingly reclusive life, especially in her later years. She rarely left her family's homestead in Amherst and saw few visitors. She never married, and the nature of her closest relationships, often maintained through voluminous correspondence, remains a subject of fascination and speculation. Her self-imposed isolation allowed her to dedicate herself to her poetic craft, creating a unique and intensely personal body of work. She dressed predominantly in white in her later years, adding to her mystique. In the mid-1880s, Dickinson's health began to fail. She suffered from Bright's disease, a kidney ailment. She died in Amherst on May 15, 1886, at the age of 55. According to her niece, Martha Dickinson, Bianchi, and other family accounts, Emily Dickinson's last words were, "I must go in. The fog is rising." These words are beautifully evocative and open to multiple interpretations. On a literal level, they could refer to the actual weather or a dimming of her vision. Metaphorically, they resonate deeply with her life and poetry. The fog rising can symbolize the approach of death, the blurring of the line between life and the unknown, or a final withdrawal from the world. For a poet who explored the mysteries of existence with such intensity from the seclusion of her home, these words provide a fittingly poetic and poignant farewell. They suggest a gentle, almost observational acceptance of her departure, a final stepping away into the mist that so often shrouded her life and her art from full public view. Number 3. The Virgin Queen who offered an empire for a moment more. Queen Elizabeth I, born on September 7, 1533 at Greenwich Palace, was Queen of England and Ireland from November 17, 1558, until her death. She was the last monarch of the Tudor dynasty. Her reign, often called the Elizabethan era or the Golden Age, was a period of significant English expansion, flourishing arts, and the rise of England as a major European power. Elizabeth never married and had no children, earning her the famous epithet, the Virgin Queen. Her unmarried status was a central aspect of her reign and her political strategy. She used the prospect of marriage as a diplomatic tool, skillfully playing European suitors against each other without ever committing. She famously declared she was married to England. Her 44-year rule was marked by challenges, including religious tensions between Protestants and Catholics, plots against her life, the threat of the Spanish Armada, which her navy famously defeated in 1588, and economic difficulties. She was known for her intelligence, shrewdness, and powerful oratory. Despite her public image of strength and invincibility, "I have the heart and stomach of a king," her later years were marked by increasing loneliness as old friends and trusted advisors passed away. She suffered bouts of melancholy and ill health. In March 1603, Elizabeth fell seriously ill, likely with a combination of ailments, including bronchitis or pneumonia. She resisted efforts to rest or receive medical treatment for some time, displaying her characteristic strong will even in decline. She eventually sank into a deep depression and stupor. Queen Elizabeth I died on March 24, 1603, at Richmond Palace at the age of 69. One of the most widely reported accounts of her last words, or among her last significant utterances, is the poignant cry, "All my possessions for a moment of time." These words, whether apocryphal or accurately recorded, capture a profound human truth. At the precipice of death, even the most powerful ruler who commanded vast wealth and an entire kingdom recognized the ultimate value of life itself. For a queen who had sacrificed personal companionship and marriage for the sake of her country, who had wielded immense power alone for over 4 decades, this desperate plea for just a little more time highlights the fundamental human desire for existence, regardless of worldly status. It suggests that all the glories of her long and solitary reign paled in comparison to the preciousness of a single, fleeting moment of life. Number 2. The celebrated novelist who reportedly wished only for death. Jane Austen, born on December 16, 1775, in Steventon, Hampshire, England, is one of the most widely read and beloved novelists in English literature. Her novels, including Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice, Mansfield Park, and Emma, offer witty and incisable portrayals of the English gentry of her time. Her works often focus on the social and economic pressures faced by women, for whom marriage was frequently the primary path to security and social standing. Austen's heroines navigate these complexities with intelligence and spirit, ultimately finding love and suitable partnerships. In contrast to the romantic destinies she crafted for her characters, Jane Austen herself never married. She had a few youthful flirtations and reportedly accepted a marriage proposal from Harris Bigwither one evening, only to retract her acceptance the following morning. Her primary emotional support came from her close-knit family, especially her sister Cassandra, to whom she was deeply attached. Austen dedicated her life to her writing, achieving modest success during her lifetime, though her full recognition came posthumously. As an unmarried woman in her era, she was largely dependent on her family for financial support. In early 1816, Austen began to suffer from an illness that progressively weakened her. The exact nature of her ailment is debated by historians, with Addison's disease and Hodgkin's lymphoma being common suggestions. By the spring of 1817, her condition was severe. She traveled to Winchester with Cassandra to seek medical treatment. She died there on July 18, 1817, at the young age of 41. Accounts of her final days and words come primarily from her family. According to a letter written by her brother Henry, when Cassandra asked Jane if there was anything she wanted, Jane's reply was, "I want nothing but death." These words are stark and direct, conveying a profound weariness and perhaps an acceptance of her suffering's end. For an author whose literary world revolved around the pursuit of happiness, often culminating in marriage, this personal expression of wanting only death is deeply poignant. It speaks to the severity of her physical pain and the exhaustion of her spirit, a stark contrast to the vivacity and romantic optimism that often characterize her novels. It is a final, unadorned statement from a woman whose own life path diverged significantly from those of her most famous heroines. Number 1. The passionate artist whose final whisper was of endless sadness. Vincent van Gogh, born on March 30, 1853, in Groot Zundert, Netherlands, was a post-impressionist painter whose emotionally evocative work, characterized by bold colors and dramatic, impulsive brushwork, had a far-reaching influence on 20th century art. His life was one of intense feeling, often marked by poverty, mental illness, and a desperate yearning for connection and understanding that largely eluded him during his lifetime. He produced an astonishing body of work, including masterpieces like Starry Night, Sunflowers, and numerous self-portraits in just over a decade. He sold only one painting during his life. Van Gogh never married and struggled deeply with loneliness. His closest relationship was with his brother Theo, an art dealer who provided him with crucial financial and emotional support. Vincent's letters to Theo offer an incredibly detailed and moving account of his artistic ambitions, his struggles, his observations of the world, and his profound sense of isolation. He sought companionship and love, but often found his intense and sometimes erratic behavior pushed people away. He suffered from episodes of severe mental distress, famously cutting off part of his own ear in December 1888 after an altercation with fellow artist Paul Gauguin, and subsequently spending time in psychiatric institutions. In May 1890, Van Gogh moved to Auvers-sur-Oise, near Paris, to be under the care of Dr. Paul Gachet. On July 27, 1890, Vincent went out to a wheat field, a subject he had painted many times, and shot himself in the chest with a revolver. He managed to stagger back to his room at the Auberge Ravoux. Theo rushed to his side. Vincent van Gogh died in his brother's arms 2 days later, on July 29, 1890, at the age of 37. According to Theo's account, Vincent's last words were, "La tristesse durera toujours." This translates from French to, "The sadness will last forever." These 3 words are devastatingly poignant, a final despairing summary of a life characterized by immense artistic passion intertwined with profound and unrelenting sorrow. For an artist who poured so much vibrant color and emotion onto his canvases, seeking to convey beauty and solace, this ultimate expression of enduring sadness is heartbreaking. It suggests that, even at the very end, the deep well of melancholy that had shadowed his existence felt inescapable and eternal. These words remain a haunting epitaph for a man who gave the world such beauty but found so little lasting peace for himself.